So I wanted to go through all of the details of this build, give you guys a little backstory. I'm sure a lot of you have already watched the previous build series that we had going. Currently this is number 7, which is the final installment of the 1996 diesel conversion swap. The Cummins engine was completely rebuilt, and that was documented as well in its own individual Cummins engine rebuild series that you can find on playlists on the YouTube channel. Okay, we'll give you guys a tour of the interior. If you watched the first video in the build series, you saw how gross this poor truck was. We have since restored the interior. Headliner is in excellent condition. The seats are also in excellent condition, with the exception of a little bit of wear on the outside of the driver's seat. None of the other seats actually show that. Color matched floor mats throughout. Brand new carpet. We also added additional sound deadener underneath the carpet. Factory center console. This has been a non-smoking truck. Ashtray has never been used. Dual power outlets down there. Seat belts are in good shape. Door jambs will take you to the back seat. Again, the original equipment, floor mats, netting. Door panels do show a little bit of fade occasionally on some of the plastic. Let's get to the rear cargo section. Original spare tire with the cover. Back seats. There is one little issue right at the bottom part of that vent. That's the only defect in the headliner. All the rear cargo lights with the map lights. New carpet. There is a little bit of wear on this weather strip, but it still seems to function correctly. Now we'll move on to the exterior. You can kind of see where the sun's hitting it. That paint is in really good condition considering its age. It does have some door dings here and there. There you can see a little dimple and a scratch. Paint is so shiny it's reflecting 100% of everything in the background. Typical waves on the factory fender flares. This door shut. All the doors open and close really, really well. There's a couple of little warbles in the paint from shopping carts. There's a couple paint chips. A couple more little door dings. Door ding right there. So if we step back, you get an overall impression of the truck. Here we are on our test drive. Hopefully you guys can hear the engine, hear all the shift patterns. Things about the vehicle: it had approximately about 195,000 miles on the chassis, and so it does have a little bit of play in the steering box, but it tracks down the road nice and doesn't wander. So we have 410 gear ratio with the 4L80. Gives it a comfortable cruising speed, about 2,000 RPMs, about 70 miles an hour. There is a slight tire whine from these BFG mud trains. Not sure if you can hear that, but I thought I would note it. Engine noise from the Cummins is noticeable, but it's not offensive. Cruise along about 50 miles an hour. I have the shift points adjusted pretty aggressively. It will shift into fourth gear and go into lockup by about 40 miles an hour. But with the US shift controller, all that stuff can be tuned to your liking. As far as overall maintenance, everything in the truck is fresh. All of the fluids have been changed. The radiator has been replaced. All the hoses have been replaced. Air conditioning charged. Brand new AC compressor. Brand new alternator. I'm not gonna say that this is a 100% restored vehicle, because obviously it still has original paint. But there's an extremely long list of parts that have been replaced and or serviced. We installed the upgraded towing mirrors on the side. They're extendable towing mirrors, and at freeway speeds they do have a little bit of wobble to them. Right now we're cruising down the freeway about 70 miles an hour. There's a little bit of a tire hop, but not anything obnoxious. Miles an hour, and we're just right about 2,000 RPMs. Oil pressure is about 60, battery charge is just about 14 volts. Here's the Suburban up on the lift. I'd give you guys a rundown of the mechanical stuff. Have this wind dam removed so you can see some of the underside a little bit better. Power steering pump, harmonic balancer. All of the clearances on these swaps are pretty tight. We're going to be upgrading the front disc brakes and wheel hubs to drilled and slotted rotors. And then we'll put that wind dam back on, the Brillo brush guard. Put that back in. And the front drive line was lengthened and balanced. Had to build a new head pipe down from the exhaust turbo and back to tie into the original 6.5 liter muffler. Those are the coolant lines that go back for the rear heat. Brand new starter. The like I said, the clearances on this stuff is pretty tight. So you can see that taped up end is the original transmission connector that got replaced with the new harness from US Shift. So the original harness is tie wrapped and kind of tucked up inside that transmission tunnel. Got the vent tube off the Cummins tied over so that it won't interfere with this front drive line. As you guys have seen in some of my other videos, the transmission mount actually has to be moved back approximately 2 3/4 of an inch. Consequently, the rear drive line needs to be shortened, and so we had it shortened, new U-joints installed, as well as balanced. The big rear differential, it's got the 13 by 3 inch brakes, as well as a 42-gallon factory fuel tank. We didn't take the chassis off the body, but while we had everything out, you guys can see in video number 2, we lifted the whole thing up with the forklift and got underneath here and pressure washed and then sprayed chassis saver on the underside to try to take care of some of the minor surface rust that we could see. And since we put a couple thousand miles on it since the swap, it's starting to get a little dirty. So coming to the back, it's got the factory installed tow hitch. And there never was since I have had it, there never was a trailer connector, but the trailer wiring harness loom is installed. So that could easily be added. An original 6.5 liter tailpipe, as well as muffler. Rear differential oil has been changed and the ring gear has been inspected. Factory exhaust hangers and the original floor pan. The rocker panels don't have any rust on them. They're just a little dirty. And again, that's where the rear heat comes in. And these are the rear AC lines. So now, go ahead and bring it down and we'll talk about the engine. And here's the engine compartment. Retained some factory GM air conditioning lines for the rear AC. Custom high flow K&N air cleaner. Decided to not try and run an intercooler on this because I don't think it, for the power output that we're trying to achieve, it's not really required. The brand new GM 6.5 liter diesel radiator that we modified the core support to in order to move the radiator at the top forward a little bit so that the Gen 1 fan shroud and the factory Dodge fan will work in there. Obviously our high mount AC system, a new Denso alternator with our standalone controller for the voltage regulator. This is a good image of why the low rear mount manifold is a nice fit. It gets that turbo tucked way down in there and keeps it away from all of the stuff that's happening up here. We opted for a couple performance upgrades on our engine rebuild. I installed the 215 horsepower VE pump calibrated injectors, as well as a high RPM governor spring and a fuel pin. And the power is not turned up very much right now, just because I wanted to get 4,000 or 5,000 miles on it before you really start deciding whether or not it needs an intercooler or a turbo upgrade or anything like that. But in my opinion, as it stands, performance-wise, it's pretty good, and we're knocking back right around 20 miles to the gallon, which on a full-size Suburban, full-size truck anyway, is pretty good. We hooked up our grid heat solenoids to a timed relay and then wired them into the wait to start light. That's what that orange wire is that's going to the grid heat. So it's as close to a factory install as we can get. You turn the key on, the wait to start light turns on, and then you can hear these relays clicking, and then you have grid heat. Engine loom itself, we grafted in the stock harness from the 6.5 liter. Tried to leave as much of the connectors intact and tucked up out of the way as possible. That's why this loom across the back is so fat. Retaining as many of the original ground wires from the harness as we can. So this vehicle in the Carfax report did have one accident that was reported. The previous owner, and I discussed that when I purchased the vehicle, and he says that the grill had been replaced and the bumper had been replaced, and it was a minor fender bender. No airbags were deployed, and no significant damage other than those two superficial parts were reported. We confirmed this also when we had this grill out to do the conversion, noting that there was no real issues found. The front frame rails inspection are perfect, and everything lines up exactly the way that it should. Dual batteries with the crossover battery cables, anti-lock brakes. One thing that I did not install is cruise control. That could be remedied by a simple aftermarket cruise control unit. So now we're going to switch over and look at the spreadsheet, the build spreadsheet, which highlights the major services that we have performed, all of the new parts that were installed, and catalogs the dates and approximate mileage of when those components were replaced. All right, guys, so I wanted to go over the couple items. First, Carfax. This is the Carfax report. I am the third owner. And when I bought the vehicle, it had about 193,000 miles on the odometer. Not sure why they say it was 191. So you can see that in our very first video, I document the mileage on it. So everybody is always going to be wondering about the accident report. So we'll scroll down to the accident report. If you look through here, there's just lots of servicing of the vehicle at the Chevrolet dealer. And then in June of 2003, there was an accident reported by the second owner. Somewhere in the between 130 and 150,000 miles. It was reported right there. The previous owner and I discussed this before I bought it, and I believe that he was telling me the truth, and that the only damage was superficial to the front bumper and the grille. So anyway, as the vehicle continued to live in Washington, you can see the miles. You took it in pretty consistently for service work. There's no substantial service performed if you look over here on the right hand side, but just kind of comes on through. And then I bought the vehicle in 2016, and that's all of the reports that I have, just the continued registration. So that's all there is to say about the Carfax report. So let's get into the what work has the overall work scope. And the way I organize all my projects for these, my personal projects, since I've owned the vehicle, is I just keep a spreadsheet and hit the highlights for each truck. So you can kind of scroll down through this spreadsheet. Again, all just the highlights of the diesel swap. Bought the transmission controller 2018, brand new alternator 2018, and the miles when all the stuff was purchased was 193,000. I completely rebuilt the engine. Also in 2018, documented that in the Cummins engine rebuild. Rebuilt the transmission with the new case because it was cracked. Again, 2018, all of that stuff. Pretty much finished it up, doing the conversion in 2018, and all of the appropriate products that I showcase in the video, the injectors, all that stuff was purchased in 2018 at about that same amount of miles. And I didn't really start driving the truck until 2019, at which time I worked on getting the air conditioning all finalized, hooked up. I figured out how I wanted to do the grid heat for the relay. I had to install a couple of batteries in the keyless entry remotes, and then I also did an additional oil change to get rid of all that break-in oil. So drove it quite a bit in 2019 and 2020. Put approximately 2,000 miles on it before I needed to remove the gauge cluster to fix the erratic fuel gauge. And unfortunately now the fuel gauge seems to be malfunctioning again, so I'll need to troubleshoot that. Also, never had any issues with the brakes, but again, thought that it would be a good idea to go through the brakes so that we could really put the Cummins Suburban into service if we wanted to tow anything like that. So 2020 we did the brakes, upgraded the front brakes to drilled and slotted rotors. Also did the rear brakes, and then monitor that. So we really have kind of checked all of the boxes in terms of getting the Suburban updated in terms of all of its required maintenance within the last several years, and honestly within the last several thousand miles. So looking ahead at what a potential buyer would need if they were to purchase this, it's going to need to have some tires replaced. The tires that are on it are in seemingly good shape. I would not trust them for a extended long distance trip right now. Most of everything that we use it for is short trips here and there. Also, the steering box and the steering linkage should probably be addressed. There is a little bit of play in it, but it's not so bad. So updated costs will definitely be wheels and tires, steering linkage. And then because the gauge cluster seems to be a source of frustration for me
I anticipate that I'm still going to have to get into that gauge cluster and address that fuel gauge issue, which is common to that generation of truck. So anyway, hopefully this gives you guys confidence in knowing what you're potentially inheriting in terms of the Blue Suburban. And let me know if you have any questions. And thanks for watching.